Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quest to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 44 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, what's the word?
The word is I'm dandy like candy.
That's 4 words.
Technically.
And I don't think you should be telling people you're dandy.
Why?
I don't know. Just doesn't seem like a word that you would normally use.
Hey, guys, it's a dandy day.
It's just dandy.
It's dandy out.
So, Gibbs, we have to start off with a little housekeeping. So we're coming up on Thanksgiving.
We are.
You and I are both on vacation.
We are.
And we decided that we've never taken a week off from either podcast.
You're right.
And this is going to be our first week off.
It is.
You're just agreeing with me on
I
everything. I am. So there won't be an episode next Sunday.
Boo.
We're going to take our first week off, relax with the family over the holidays, recharge our batteries, come back stronger and better than ever. So we'll be back in 2 weeks. Gibbs will be better than he's ever been.
We're going to be gone 1 week.
It'll be 2 weeks from the time that this airs.
Yeah, but they only miss 1 week of episode.
Yeah.
Okay. But the way you say it sounds like they won't hear us for 2 weeks.
Well, they won't hear us for 2 weeks. It'll be 2 whole weeks.
No, they're here as this upcoming
Sunday. A whole week will go by, no episode. A whole nother week.
Well, that's true. I get what you're saying.
2 weeks.
Hang on. It's coming.
It is 2 weeks.
Yeah, I gotcha. Oh, my gosh. That means, like, there's some people that won't clean unless they can listen to us while they clean. Their house is going to be a mess.
They can wait a week. No, they can't. Well, they got this one to get them through Thanksgiving.
Yeah, maybe they'll replay it and listen to it a second time.
Yeah,
because if you listen to it a second time, you hear things you didn't hear the first time.
Well, because what people don't know is you and I go back and record.
Yeah.
We record it different. So if
I put secret messages throughout.
Exactly.
If you play 2 of them at the same time, they actually line up together and they'll say something totally different.
That would be freaky. We should try that.
Yeah, like simultaneously record 2 at the same time.
All right, Gibbs. Let's do Patreon supporters. We've got a ton of new supporters.
Let's do it.
Jackie, Val
Kilmer,
Laura Steventon. I don't think it's Val Kilmer, although that would be cool if it was.
It'd be like Batman.
I want it to be old Val Kilmer, though.
Batman one?
Like young, no, like more like Real Genius Val Kilmer.
Oh, yeah.
That's a great movie, by the way.
It was a good movie.
Helena Gustafson.
Yeah, Helena.
Big on social media.
She is. She's a good pal.
She's a good egg.
She's a good egg.
Kate Brown, Carly Hatchell, A Wondering Generality.
Just a friendly name.
Latera. Adam Chandler, who made his donation on behalf of Emily Rice and Harriet Davis.
Emily Rice and Harry Davis?
Harriet.
That sounds much better.
Harriet
Davis.
Ginger Lemontagne, or
sounds like a good dessert.
Lemontagne. I don't know. I can't wait till. I hope she reaches out and tells me which one it is.
Yeah, I just called her a good dessert.
Yeah. Todd Collier. I just skip over whatever you say. Amy Flowers, Paige Summerfield, Karina Michalowski, Donna Rubba,
Bubba Hubba.
or Ruba, but it's two B's. I'm going Rubba. Rebecca Marchetti, Jeffrey Bolak, and Elizabeth Roberts.
Liz, yeah.
And then on PayPal, we actually had a donation from Susan Nathan. Much appreciated.
Really appreciate it.
And going back into the vault this week, Gibbs, we picked Catherine Clark, been with us a long time, continues to support us month after month.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thanksgiving's coming up, Gibbs. I know for me, I'm thankful for everybody that supports us.
I'm extremely thankful.
Whether it's Patreon, PayPal, all of our social media friends,
Yep.
Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
I mean, even the dude that put like on the bathroom stall looking for a good time.
Call Gibby.
Well, that probably too, but
Hashtag Team Gibby.
yeah, hashtag TCAT. Hashtag TCAT. Mine's on the female wall. What are you talking about?
No. You already stepped in that one.
Yeah, it's all right.
So make sure you jump over. If you haven't already, check out the newest episode of True Crime All the Time. It's on Stephen McDaniel. And this guy's out there, Gibbs. This is the murder of Lauren Giddings.
Some of the best clips ever.
The audio of Stephen McDaniel is something else. All right, so let's get into this episode of Unsolved.
Just do it.
We're talking about the husbands of Raynella Leath.
Multiples.
So the death of Ed Dossett, the death of David Leath, and how their wife Raynella kind of factors into all this. Because according to her, Ed Dossett died from being trampled by some cattle.
By some of his livestock. Yep.
And her next husband, David Leath, died by suicide.
Tragically.
So let's start at the beginning. That's where we like to start. Raynella met her first husband, Ed Dossett, while she was attending East Tennessee State. She's going to nursing school. Ed had plans to pursue a law degree. Raynella was also on the school's rifle team.
It's pretty prestigious, really, if you think about it. University rifle team.
Now, is she shooting a rifle, or is it that fake wooden one that you're throwing in the air?
No, she's shooting a rifle. She can hit a quarter off your ear. And you got big ears, though.
I do, like Spock.
Yeah, kind of.
They're pointy. So Raynella and Ed, they eventually marry, and they make a home at Ed's family farm. And when we say family farm, we're talking about 165 acres. It's a farm.
Yeah, it's a big farm. It's a big cattle farm.
This is located near Knoxville, and Knoxville's a place that I actually know very well. Half of my family is from just outside of Knoxville.
Oh, yeah?
Jacksboro, La Follette area.
I know. I used to have a cabin down there.
Yep.
Norris Lake.
We used to go to Norris Lake all the time.
Yeah.
When I was a kid. I like Knoxville. Been to many University of Tennessee football games.
Oh, yeah.
My grandfather used to have season tickets. The pair would have 3 children together, Maggie, Eddie Jr., and Katie. And as a mom, it was said that Raynella was very protective. Now, a lot of moms are. It's not unusual. Very protective of her kids.
Oh, yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
And Ed, in addition to running this family farm of 165 acres, he was elected as the Knox County DA in Knoxville. Pretty powerful position, prestigious.
I would say so, sure.
You know.
That's a good-sized county.
County in a big city.
Yeah.
Or in which a big city is located.
Right. Glad you got that right.
And Raynella was the director of nursing for a local medical center. So, I mean, both of these people are doing very well in their own right.
Very professional jobs at a pretty high level.
High level. Got 3 kids, raising a family. Seems like everything's going great. But at the age of 43, Ed was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And within about 9 months, he would be dead. But he wouldn't die from the cancer. You know, we said it up front. He died from what you'd have to call a bizarre farming type accident.
I mean, it's a strange thing to happen, to be trampled by a stampede of cattle.
And I would have to think that would be a horrible way to die. Because you know that's not an instant death. I mean, you're going to be trampled and
Yeah.
it just doesn't.
Nothing about it sounds appealing.
No, it doesn't sound good at all. But only 6 months later, Raynella would remarry. And this was kind of shocking to both her friends and her family.
You know, I can see that, but I can also see the flip side of that. I've known of some people to marry fairly quick after their spouse dies, if their spouse had like a terminal illness, because they bond with, you know, that person's friend or that person's
Caregiver, whoever.
Whoever,
yeah,
right?
sure.
There's some type of bondage there. Not bondage.
There might have been some bondage involved as well. I don't know.
Yeah. There's some type of bond.
Each his own.
There's some type. You're leaving this in, aren't you?
Oh,
I'm screwed.
I'm leaving it in.
There's some type of bond that people that build through that time, and they just, you know, they carry it on after the fact. So,
Well, and there are some people too that just can't stand to be alone.
yeah,
There are people in
That's
life
true.
like that, you know, live with their family their whole life. They got married, you know, they went to college and had a boyfriend there.
Yep.
They got married, never lived on their own.
They just like having somebody. They
And
fall in
don't-
love quick.
and don't want to be alone.
So, but I think some people here thought maybe she should have grieved much longer
Yes,
than she did.
I think for us, it would be hard to say that, but her friends and family said that.
Yeah.
So they thought that.
Well, and some of it might have been the fact that it was Ed's best friend and their next door neighbor.
So that adds a whole nother element to it. So this was a man by the name of David Leath. He was a barber in town, but like you said, he was also Ed's best friend and their neighbor.
Yeah.
So not only is the period of time very short, but the fact that it's a neighbor, I think that's probably what caused the friends and family to really look at it as something that they thought of as strange.
I would say, hey, it's 165 acres away. Tried to make it sound better. It was 165 acres away.
Well, we know you can justify anything. So
yeah. I'm good with numbers too.
if you were, you would know it's not 165 acres away
I know that.
because it's not a straight line.
But somebody out there doesn't know that.
No, if somebody is, they're going to point that out.
All right.
So
Hey, we're not talking frontage here, Gibby.
I did it ahead of time. But Raynella was head over heels for David. Treated him like he was her one true love. Like they were meant to be together. So we have to talk about Raynella just a little bit. It was said that she was one of the prettiest women in town.
Yeah. And she was a very confident woman.
Confident and I think charming as well.
Charming. Yeah.
I read that.
But also a woman you wouldn't want to cross. You wouldn't want to get on her bad side.
Well, and sometimes that all goes together, right?
Yeah.
Confident, charming, don't mess with me.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Unless it turns to murder,
Well, then it goes wrong.
then it goes wrong. Then
But
there
up
is
until that-
something
yeah,
wrong with
but
that.
until that point, there's nothing wrong with it.
No, there's a lot of women that are like that. Beautiful, charming, confident. You know, that's a lot of good characteristics to have.
But you cross me,
And I'll drop you where you stand.
yeah, I'll cut your eye out.
Get your eyebrows off.
Cut your eyebrows.
You
Well,
gonna-
that'd be devastating. Some women though, no eyebrows.
No, I thought you were talking about the woman doing that to a man, though.
Yeah, that's true.
I thought you were going back to Narcy Novak.
Oh, my
that we
gosh.
did on True Crime All the
Yeah,
Time.
it was terrible.
Where she had her husband's eyes cut out.
Yeah,
Ugh. And then you talk about David Leath, and he was known to be very charming as well, very loving, fun guy. Everybody liked him. Good guy to be around.
and you know what? If you ever been to I know you probably haven't. If you ever go to a bar,
I knew that was
if you
coming.
ever go to a barber shop, a successful barber, he's got to have some really good skills because you got to have rapport with everybody that comes in the door. You got to be able to.
Oh, it's not just about cutting hair.
No, it's a.
You got to be able to tell a story. This is like a small town barber
Yeah.
or a local barber.
Right, yeah.
This is not Supercuts.
No, it's not
or
super cuts or
Good Sam's or whatever. some of those
yeah,
are.
or sports cuts where the
This is the
girls
one where
wear
the
half
little
shirts. No, this is the
Red, white, and blue pole.
Yeah, the guy with the white coat overcoat on, cutting your hair and doing it right, and
Might give you the warm shave.
warm shave. Might cut those long hairs sticking out of your nose and your ear right there.
I need that.
You might want to take care of this, buddy. I know you're not doing anything with up top, but
Don't let the rest of it go to shit.
yeah, just because it's growing doesn't mean it's good.
I need all I can get, man.
Yeah. You can't paste it up there.
But everybody did say that about David. And I think you're right, Gibbs. You know, to be a really good barber, you got to be able to shoot the bull.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
You got to be able to carry on a conversation. You got to be witty and funny and, you know, all that stuff. That's what people like.
Yeah.
That's what keeps the customers coming back. I think he had that.
Charisma.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's a good word for it. And I think Raynella and David, they were very happy together.
Yeah, I think so.
You know, even in the wake of this tragic death of her first husband and David's best friend, they were happy. But that happiness is going to be shattered, especially for Raynella, through another tragic event. And it's her 11-year-old being killed in a car crash. And this comes, you know, within a couple years of the two of them getting married. So her first husband supposedly trampled by cattle, her 11-year-old killed in a car crash. Oh, that's tough. In a 2.5 year
that is tough, man.
Period of time.
It's depressing. Maybe she gets over, I don't want to say over, but maybe she recovers a little bit better from the first husband. Yeah, I don't think you ever can recover from losing a child. It's just I can't imagine.
No, and sadly, you know, we've done a lot of cases involving the death of children, and I think we've seen that, you know, especially in a lot of the unsolved cases where these parents are never the same. I just don't think you would be. There's no way for you to go.
I know you wouldn't.
You move forward, but
yeah,
you would never be the same.
Yeah, we've got a good listener on social media. She talks about, you know, she lost a young child. And she talks about it a lot. How it's just, and we get a lot of emails from people, you know, with firsthand knowledge. I didn't tell you, Gibbs. We got an email about our episode last week. Oh yeah,
of a woman whose boyfriend committed suicide in the same room that she was in.
Wow.
And her and I talked about it a lot and she gave me some great insight on some of the things that we talked about in last week's episode. And it was very revealing. We get a lot of great knowledge because you and I say it. Some of this stuff we've never been through.
No.
And it's really, you can talk about it, but you can't say this is how it would be.
Yeah.
There's no way because you and I haven't been through these things.
People reach out to us and we actually respond back.
And they do tell us what some of these things are like. It's sad, but it's cathartic sometimes. She actually said it was cathartic for her to talk about it. And it helps us in moving forward with podcasts with episodes if we run into something similar in the future. So you know Raynella's heartbroken. All the different types of emotions that would come from, you know, losing a child. And this event would also take a huge toll on her marriage with David.
Not surprised.
No, I was going to say, that's a thing that you see a lot of times as well. It really is hard to move forward with a marriage the same way that you had before in a lot of instances. And I think from the research, what I took from it was that the communication just kind of fell apart, right? You get in, I don't know if Raynella was in some sort of depression, but the communication between her and David just changed in a dramatic way. Now, about 5 years after this, so they've been married 7 years, Raynella and David, they receive some more really bad news. David gets hospitalized because of depression. And on top of the depression, he was being looked at for what doctors were thinking was maybe the onset of dementia. And Raynella would actually write in her journal, 2003, January 19th, that she started to see some real changes in David's personality. And according to her, he was becoming hateful, aggressive, controlling. I mean, to the point where she was scared. She was getting scared of the changes that she was seeing in this man that she'd been married to for 7 years.
That would be alarming, you know, to see somebody that you fell in love with. It was all this good stuff, caring, loving, compassionate.
All the good things we said, right?
Yeah, and now they're snappy and, you know, mean, argumentative.
And it's just about 3 months later after this journal entry that Raynella made. So we're talking March 13th, 2003, around 11 a.m., David Leath was found dead from a gunshot wound. And the question here, very much like in our episode last week, Gibbs, was this a suicide because of David's depression, or was this murder?
County 911.
Help me! Help me!
Ma'am, where are you?
Please help me!
Ma'am, what's going on? Ma'am.
My husband's hurt himself. Hurry!
Okay, where is your husband? Where's
Hurry!
your...
He's in the bed. Please hurry!
Okay, ma'am, I need you to calm down so I can get some help to you, okay? Ma'am.
So that's Raynella's 911 call, and you can hear her on the call tell the operator, hurry, send somebody, my husband's hurt himself, he's in the bed.
So the police arrive on the scene, and when they get there, they find the revolver, a Colt 38 Special. They find that 3 shots have been fired. They find the cylinder open on the revolver, and of course, he's laying in a pool of blood on the bed. Some of the investigators think that the way the gun is laying looks kind of suspicious, but they don't really give it a whole lot of thought at that time.
And David's own daughter said that, no way would her dad have killed himself. Number one, she said he hated guns to the point where they scared him.
Yeah, I mean, this wasn't even his gun, right? This was like his grandparents' gun or something that somehow
was passed down from generation
that
or
they
something.
didn't even know was in the house. According to Raynella, she didn't even know that they had this gun in the house.
And his daughter pointed out that her dad was right-handed. So why would he have used his left hand to pull the trigger? And there's a couple things about this, Gibbs. Number one, he was basically blind in his left eye.
Right.
So that would be the dominant eye that you would use, most people would use if you're shooting left-handed. You can use the other eye, but
I'm trying to think, 'cause
harder.
I'm left-handed. Mm-hmm. That's what makes
Most
me
most criminals are.
right. Actually, it's a true thing.
It is a true thing.
Yeah.
I wasn't saying that because you're a criminal.
And that's what makes me good with a knife as well.
Yeah.
But so I'm left-handed, but you know what? I can go left or right.
You can go either way.
I can go left or right. I'm just trying to remember.
When you say you can go left or right-handed?
Yes.
Like shooting?
On a lot of things.
Okay. I didn't know if you were talking about specifically to do with your eyes or just with your hands.
My eyes too, I think. I think I can shoot either way.
And investigators can tell that David fired the gun from his left hand. I mean, the gun's going to fall in a certain location. They're going to do GSR testing. It's not that hard to figure out. So you have his daughter, you have other family members ruling out suicide. There's no way in their minds that David could have committed suicide. And within a very short time period, 24 hours, the Knox County medical examiner would agree and would come out and rule the death of David Leath as a homicide. Now, it's very typical, Gibbs, we talk about all the time. The spouse becomes the focus of the investigation.
Yeah, it's normal. And I think, especially because she's the stepmom, right? So I think, the police are hearing a little bit of some things about her from David's daughter, which was his partner in the barbershop, come out and make some comments about her stepmom.
But there's a huge problem that develops.
It's a very large problem.
And it's a conflict of interest.
Yeah, because she was at one point the first lady of the DA's office, right? She was married to the top dog at Knox County DA's office.
So because of this, everyone in the district attorney's office, they knew her. I mean, obviously they knew Ed, her first husband, but because of that, they knew Raynella. So the question was, how could they treat this investigation fairly and in an unbiased manner?
And I don't think they could. I don't know if they were favorable towards her or unfavorable towards her. Either way, right? I mean, they open up the case for future appeal and other issues.
Well, and I think because of that, they probably just said, we better just step aside,
recruit-
recuse
Yeah,
ourselves.
recuse ourselves.
Or recluse.
Recluse.
Brown recluse, as you would say.
Yeah, that's a dangerous spider, man.
So they need to find a prosecutor in another county to step in, take the case. But that proves to be very difficult because...
Well, so one, they don't really have a really good case at this point that another prosecutor from another county feels like taking on. And then, I mean, no one wants to talk about it, but you got to know this costs money.
Oh, everything costs money.
You just don't try somebody, if you don't have a strong case. That's why, these prosecutors go up to the DA and say, do we take this to trial or not? And they're going to look at it, and people get pissed off, and they should, but not everything's ever going to get tried because if they don't feel like they can actually take it and slam dunk it, there's a lot of times this is not going to go to trial.
Or that's why you get a number, as many plea bargains.
Plea bargains and things like that.
But I think you're right. I think what you're saying spot on because the case is not that strong. So they do have a hard time finding another prosecutor to step in. It's not going to be until 2006, March of 2006, when David's own daughter has to file a civil case against Raynella to keep her from inheriting her dad's estate. And this is when prosecutors would finally start stepping up and they would start to take some interest in the case. True Crime All the Time Unsolved is brought to you by Rockstar Games and LA Noire, the dark detective crime thriller set among the violence, glamour, and corruption of 1940s Los Angeles. Out now for Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, and PS4, LA Noire allows you to scour crime scenes, pick up and examine objects, interrogate witnesses, and determine who is telling the truth or lying to cover up a brutal murder. Solve crimes inspired by real cases from one of LA's most violent decades. LA Noire from Rockstar Games is out now. Rated M for mature. Order now at rockstargames.com/LA Noire. And it would be in 2006 when the prosecutor would charge Raynella with the murder of David Leath. So, Gibbs, this is about 3.5 years since his death.
It's a pretty long run.
Before they actually charge her.
Yeah, I mean, if she's guilty, thinking nothing's going to happen, and all of a sudden you get that knock on the door, it's never fun when you open that door and you see that guy in that uniform, man.
Yeah, especially 3.5 years later.
Yeah.
So they're prepping for trial. They're doing the investigation. And it's during this part that the death of her first husband, Ed, resurfaces. And we talked about it, right? The report was that he was found dead after being trampled by cattle. But even back then when it happened, there was a lot of people that found that very strange. Because you have to think, right? Ed grew up on this farm. He'd lived there all of his life. How would a man that had been around cattle all that time have this happen to him?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people in the town were saying the same thing, right? I mean, just like you said, he knows what to look out for. He knows what not to do. He knows all this kind of stuff. And at the same time, he was on some pretty strong medication for his cancer. So why would he even walk out to that middle of the field?
Well, yeah, I think that's the other thing that people really questioned was why would he even walk that far, right, from the house, knowing that he was weak, knowing that he was on all this medication.
So some of the theories were that Raynella came up with a plan to have him go out to this field and be trampled. I'm sorry, it sounded like I laughed. I didn't mean that, but it just, when you hear it, doesn't sound right. Who would say that? But I know what they're trying to say. If he goes out there with some extra medicine in him and falls down and kind of goes into a comatose state and he gets trampled, the insurance is going to be much higher that way versus if he just dies from the cancer in his bed.
Right, because you probably have an accidental death benefit.
Probably.
On top of possibly, I don't know.
Yeah. But then a lot of his friends said he wouldn't do that. That's not him.
But I get where you're coming from, where it sounds like a very tough plan to pull off.
Yeah, I think so too.
Pretty complicated. Well, maybe not that complicated. Just it seems far-fetched, but hey, we've seen a lot crazier things happen.
Yeah. And the medical examiner would say at the time of his death back then, it was noted that he had large amounts of morphine in his system. Now, granted, he was terminally ill with cancer, so he
was probably racked with pain.
So he would have had morphine in him, but I think they're saying he had more than the recommended dose of morphine in his system at the time.
And it's about a year after Raynella gets charged with David's death that the same medical examiner would now change the ruling on Ed's death to homicide. And I think a lot of it, Gibbs, is all around what you just talked about, the level of morphine in his system.
So now she's being charged with 2 murders, both her husbands.
And you know what that means? Black Widow.
Black Widow.
You get the Black Widow label, and that's what she got. I mean, that's what the media comes out saying, that she's a Black Widow. There was even a book written about this whole saga. It was called Her Deadly Web.
Yeah. Lines right up there with that Black Widow thing for sure.
So Knox County takes Raynella to trial first on David's death in 2009. So this is 6 years since his death. But the jury can't come to unanimous decision. They're deadlocked at 11-1. So that's 11 jurors voting for guilty with 1 lone holdout. So what you end up with is a mistrial.
Man, just one off.
1 person held out, but they're going to retry her. They're not going to let her off the hook. And in another year, she gets tried again. And this time, the jurors come back 12-0, guilty.
They got her.
And she's convicted of first-degree murder. And she gets a life sentence.
Podcast is over.
That's it.
We're done.
It would be on True Crime All the Time. But this is unsolved, so it's not over. But because of this guilty verdict and the life sentence that she got for David's death or murder, what they convicted her of, they don't see a reason, the county doesn't, to try her for Ed's murder. This goes back to what you talked about, Gibbs, finances.
Yeah.
Why are you going to spend a bunch of money,
resources to
get
convict somebody that's already convicted?
To get a second life sentence?
Right.
So they don't want to spend, the county funds on that. They don't want to put the family through another trial. Because right now at this point, they don't need to. But 6 years after her conviction, it's tossed out because the trial judge had been impaired while sitting on the bench during this trial. And it comes out that he had a drug addiction and he was ultimately kicked off the bench.
How frustrating is that? As a prosecutor, you've got to be so pissed because you line everything up the first time and you get the 11-1. Disappointed. So the year later, you package it together just a little bit better, clean it up some, take it back, you hit it out of the ballpark, 12-0. You got her. She's going to go away. And then you get this call, because it's what happened, right?
I'm sure.
They got this call from this investigation committee and said, hey, remember old Judge what's his name? Well, he was diving in some pills and some other stuff, and it's going to negate all these trials that occurred from this date to this date.
All the convictions.
All the convictions. And this happens to be one of your murder convictions. I mean, how pissed would you be?
You know how much work goes into, from both the prosecution and the defense, but how much work goes into prepping for a trial.
Yeah.
A big murder trial.
It's a big deal.
It's a lot of work.
And it's a lot of money for the county to put out for it, too.
So we talk about the frustration of the prosecution, but what about David's family? Because this whole time, they're thinking, okay, justice was done.
Right.
She's going to serve this life sentence. She's going to pay for what she did.
Right.
Now, all of a sudden, they're going to get the news as well that, you know what? She's not.
No. Now, on the flip side, she just hit the lotto, and her surviving kids and grandkids and all that are ecstatic, and they should be.
Yeah, I'm sure they never thought she was guilty. Her side didn't.
Yeah, and they're like, thank goodness this happened, because otherwise Mom would have rotted away in prison. Now we've got her back. Now we can get our life back on track.
But this whole odyssey is not over. It's 14 years after David's death now. Raynella is going to go on trial again, trial number 3. And this time there's a new prosecutor on the case. And we're talking about this year. So this is May of 2017.
This is fresh. And for Raynella, she's probably gone, and her family, man, how many times are you going to take me back to trial for this? And then, of course, David's daughter is probably like, as many times as it takes, because we got you twice, really.
Yeah, and I would think the prosecutor would be saying the same thing, right? First time 11-1, they've got to retry that case.
Right.
Now, if it was 1-11, maybe they don't.
Yeah, but if you got 11-1, 12-0, I mean, the odds are good.
And they think she's guilty, so they've got to retry her.
Yeah, and typically as time goes by, the prosecution's case does get weaker as time goes by.
There's no doubt about it, because witnesses.
Right. It just makes it tougher because the recall of the stories are not as good as they were initially.
Yeah,
from the witnesses.
People's memories over time are not as good, not as crisp. So this trial starts May of this year, 2017. The prosecutor tells the jury that Raynella shot David Leath. He would say that she actually fired a shot at David that missed the first time, and that it would be the second shot that would end David's life. Then she puts the gun in his hand, his left hand, fires a third shot to get the gunshot residue on his hand. And the prosecutors would show the jury the Colt 38 police special revolver that was found at the scene. And a former FBI agent tells the jury how easy this gun is to fire, to shoot.
So it's a 38 special revolver. So it's one of the more easily fired guns. I mean, it's not like one that semi-automatic that has a clip, right? I mean, this is as far as mechanism goes.
Oh, yeah.
This is pretty much a surefire.
Oh, I get what you're saying.
You pull the trigger, it's going to work.
On a lot of semi-automatic pistols, especially 9mm 45, the slide it's not easy to cock back for some women, especially.
Could be temperamental.
And some women, no, it's just there's a lot of force required.
Oh, okay.
To rack the slide.
Right.
That's why a lot of women start out with revolvers.
Yeah.
Men as they age, if you get arthritis, it's really hard to rack the slide for some people.
Gotcha.
So I do think a revolver is easy to load, right? You just open up the cylinder,
drop in
the rounds. They don't jam.
Yeah.
Like a semi-auto does. And, the 38 special is a pretty light round, compared to like a 357 Magnum or a 45 or something like that.
Now, is a 38 a double or single action? Or does it vary?
I think it can vary.
Okay.
Mostly, I think this would probably be a double action revolver.
That's where you click it back and then pull the trigger?
No, that's where a double action is where pulling the trigger cocks the hammer back all at the same time.
Okay.
And then when it breaks, it falls forward. Single action is where you have to cock it yourself.
You have to do it yourself. Okay.
Yeah. And they know that 3 shots were fired because at the crime scene, they took pictures of the cylinder while they were doing the investigation. So that's the other thing about a revolver. When in a semi-automatic, the casings are flying out. You got to find them.
Sorry.
In a revolver, the spent casings, they're still in the cylinder, right? To reload, you got to dump them out. So that's another difference between, like semi-auto and a revolver. Although it's not hard to figure out how many shots are fired usually from a semi-automatic, right? They don't have to find the casings. They can figure it out in other ways.
But because I guess when they find the gun, right, it looks like when his hand hit the bed, the cylinder flew open, and they can see in, like you said, and they see the 3 casings side by side, and they each have the pin marking or the
indent
where the firing pin hit.
Yeah, where the hammer
clearly they can see that those were the 3 shots that were fired.
Sure.
So they would tell the jury that the first shot and the second shot are both silver Remingtons, and they would find fragments of those in the walls and also in David's head. The third round was actually a gold Winchester that was fired into David's head and ultimately ended up in the mattress.
And the prosecution would go on to say that they believe this third, what they're calling the gold bullet, right? And I think Gibbs, silver and gold, I think what they're talking about is casings, right? We're not talking about actual silver bullets or gold bullets.
We're not shooting vampires.
No, I believe they're talking about like nickel-plated casings and brass-plated.
Yeah, I believe
when they
you're right.
say silver and gold. I could be wrong, and maybe that's an actual brand of bullet that they actually call them silver and gold. But my feeling is that maybe they found the casings, and that's what they're talking about. But they think this third bullet was fired after David had already been shot in the head once, and that this is the one that severed his brainstem. This third one you talk about being fired in the head, ultimately the bullet is found in the mattress. Now they showed the jury the blood spatter, round drops of blood, which they say indicate his head was well over a foot above the mattress when the gun was fired. And the scenario that they play out is that Raynella is standing at the side of the bed while David is asleep. She fires the first round, pop, but the shot misses and it goes into the headboard. But this wakes David up and he raises his head, right? He's just heard a gunshot be pretty loud. He raises his head up. She fires the second shot. That strikes him in the head and it causes him to fall back down basically where he started. The prosecution says any other scenario than that, and the blood would have had to have been able to turn corners to get to where it landed.
Which is impossible.
That's
the point they're making.
That's what they're saying.
Unless you're in the movie The Matrix, where the bullet can bend around.
Well, this is like some JFK type stuff.
Yeah.
When you go to the trial in the movie JFK and how they're laying all that out. But then you have the defense. So that's the prosecution. Now you have to talk about the defense. And the defense is going to play up the angle that David was the shooter. Obviously, I mean, they have to make the jury believe that David committed suicide. He took his own life. And they will tell the jury that a suicide victim can and has fired more than one shot when attempting to kill themselves. And this is one of those instances, according to them. And it's always been a question that I've had, Gibbs. Not really doing a lot of research on suicides, but I guess I would have always thought that if you held a gun to your head, you fired a shot into your head, you probably wouldn't be able to get off another round.
I wouldn't think so.
You're going to fall down. That gun's going to fall out of your hand. That's just kind of what I've always thought. Now, if it grazed you or it wasn't incapacitating, that would be different. But I got from this, at least from the research or what the prosecution put out, that not the first shot because that missed, but the second shot was a fatal shot. Now, the third one, they say severed his brainstem, but the second one I think was enough to kill him.
Yeah, I agree.
From what I understand of the research. So I think that's a big hurdle for the defense to get around. If the second shot was that devastating, how did he get off a third? And the defense would talk to the jury about why Raynella would even do this. They really played up the fact that, she cared for David. She loved him. She was taking care of him every day.
Yeah, to the point. I mean, heck, let's play the interrogation tape. You can hear in there how much she likes to take care of what she calls her boy.
Seemed more together than he had for 2 or 3 weeks. Last week, her voice was slurring again, and he was being hateful, and that's always an indication.
Hateful to who?
Hateful to everybody.
You too?
Yeah, but...
Does it hurt your feelings?
No, because I know what we're dealing with. I mean,
That's gotta
anytime...
hurt sound for you.
Yeah, but he's my boy.
So what time did you wake up this morning?
Oh, probably 7:30.
Did you ever go back into the bedroom where Dave was during any of this time?
Sure.
Okay, was he up?
No, I always fix Presley.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you lose a husband, you really spoil the second one.
Okay.
I closed the door and I said, hey, big boy. No answer.
So you went back to the room, you opened the door. What did you say?
It was kind of dark in there, but I could tell someone right, because he was just kind of laying funny, and I went over to him, and I think I covered him up. I saw the gun laying there.
Had you ever seen that gun before?
Never in my life.
Now you can hear in the tape, this was something that was recorded, happened right after his death. I mean, this was investigators on the scene talking to Raynella. She's obviously distraught. And back to what you said, Gibbs, I mean, she talks about the fact that his demeanor was changing in the last couple weeks. Mm-hmm. But if you believe what she's saying, you know, she loved him. She was taking care of him. She understood what they were dealing with.
Yeah. Now, she was a licensed nurse, too. So she had a little bit more knowledge about that. And she also says, look, when you lose one husband, you take care of the second one. You know?
She even said spoil.
Yeah, you spoil that second one.
But again, like every case we do, right, it comes down to, do you believe what somebody is saying? It's kind of the position that the jury is in a lot of times.
And to the point, this defense of hers is saying, look, she had no motive. You got to have motive. She didn't have motive. Clearly they're trying to put doubt, right, into the jury's mind.
That's their job, for sure. And then the defense takes their turn at combating the prosecution's evidence about the gunshots. And what the defense would argue is that the shots could have occurred in another order than what the investigators and the prosecution claimed. They have their own expert who say that even if the shots occurred in the order and the way that the prosecution laid out, the shooter could still have been David. And the expert throws out a term to the jury, and I've never heard of it before, Gibbs, but it's cadaveric spasm. And the expert explains it as this happens when a person's hands squeeze immediately at the time of death.
That kind of makes sense, because I know the body naturally does some types of spasms, because when people die, most of them release body fluids and go to the bathroom.
Yeah, they poop themselves.
They do.
On the poop deck.
They do. But they do.
And it's, not being morbid or making light of it or anything, but it's one reason why I would never commit suicide or hang myself. I would never want my family to see me, number one, in that state, but also the fact that I've pooped myself.
You're going to shit yourself?
Yeah, I don't want to shit myself and then have my family have to deal with all that.
But you've sharted before, so.
Oh, I've sharted in this episode.
Yeah, I was wondering what that was.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's very interesting when you get these experts. And, we have a lot of listeners that are very well versed in some of these types of things, and they love to weigh in on it. And we love when they do, because they got a lot of good knowledge.
Yeah, but remember last week we had they had some experts. The prosecution had an expert that ended up helping the defense out.
Yeah.
So sometimes experts can backfire on you. Do your homework on your experts before you bring them to trial.
When the defense would also bring up some things that happened in trial 1 and 2. And in particular, they talked about the medical examiner mentioning that David had medication in his body that would have rendered him incapacitated and not able to kill himself. So basically, in trial 1 and 2, medical examiner said, he was so drugged up, had so much medication in him, there's no way he could have fired the gun and kill himself.
So it had to be her.
Had to be her. But the prosecution doesn't bring this same evidence up now in this trial.
And that makes the defense suspicious on why they didn't do it this time.
And then the defense gets around to doing a demonstration of what they believe happened.
Yeah, so, this is when the defense does... This is a showcase time, right? They bring in the actual bloody mattress.
This is the Perry Mason moment.
Yes, they set it up, and they have the holes in the bed and the headboard, and they run the dowels through, so you can see the
trajectory
of the bullets. And then the lead defense attorney gets on the bed with the actual gun and kind of lays down in the position that he said that David would have been in. It's pretty theatrical, really. And David's family, they say it's over the top, and who would ever believe it the way he did it? You know, he was really stretching to pull it off, but he actually gets on the bed and performs what he says David would have done and how it would have went, to the point that how you said, what's the odds if I hit myself on that shot that I'm actually going to pull that trigger again? And I get they had this expert come in and say, well, your body clenches. I don't know. Is there enough force there? And when you shoot that time, is that trigger, your finger still going to be on that trigger pull? Or is your finger going to come out of the hold? I mean, there's so many questions, and everything has to line up perfectly for that to occur. Yeah,
because that's the one thing we haven't talked about is the trigger. We talked a little bit about semi-automatic pistols versus revolvers, especially with a double action revolver. Usually that trigger pull is heavier than like a striker fired semi-automatic pistol, or especially with like a single action semi-automatic pistol, like a Colt 45.
Right. I mean, they're just trying to drive again. I mean, they're doing their job. If he can get, well, he wants them all to flip to, reasonable doubt, no, not guilty.
Oh, sure.
But even if he gets a few that's on the fence, he's going to pull off a mistrial.
Another mistrial. But I think the prosecution's best witness was David's own daughter, because she would say on the stand that Raynella called her at the barbershop the morning of the shooting.
Which was weird because Raynella had never called David's daughter, ever. So some suspicions pretty heavy right there initially.
So in this call, she asked David's daughter if she had seen David and if he had worked out that morning, because apparently he didn't eat his breakfast. So I don't know if Raynella thought that, did he run out of the house without eating his breakfast because he had to get to the gym?
Yeah, it was a little strange. Every morning she makes him breakfast and puts it by the bed. So that day she made him breakfast. According to her, she made the breakfast, put it by the bed. She took off and went to the hospital where she works, where David's mom was actually staying at the time, at the nursing home that's connected to the hospital. And phone records show that that's where she was when she made this call to David's daughter. So their theory is that she did this to set up an alibi, because now she can say, and they have records, that she called David's daughter at such and such time on such and such date from her work. But there's a problem with this.
I think it's a big problem, because we even heard in the clip, right? She told the investigator that she made him breakfast every morning. And she told the police that she put the breakfast that morning by the bed for David, and she left the house around 9:30. She made the call to David's daughter at 9:50. This is all in the morning, a.m. And the prosecutor is trying to show the jury that this is a strange thing to ask David's daughter if she's seen David when Raynella just left him 20 minutes ago, knowing he was asleep. So Gibbs, in that 20 minutes, David would have had to, from a sleep, wake up, somehow go to the gym, and make it to the barbershop.
Right.
In her mind, she's thinking this is plausible.
Right, exactly.
And the prosecution is saying, who thinks like that?
Right.
Hell, it takes me 20 minutes just to get out of bed.
Yeah, that's where you even head into the bathroom.
Yeah. It's another 30 minutes.
Yeah, it's where you shart yourself again.
So I think that it's kind of compelling, and you laid the foundation, right? She's trying to create an alibi. That's what the prosecution is saying. And it makes a lot of sense.
The other thing was she makes this statement to David's daughter that he didn't eat his breakfast. Well, how's she know he didn't eat? She laid it there. He was sleeping. She left.
She left.
So how'd she know he didn't eat the breakfast? Definitely throwing some suspicion in there.
It's something that, in the research, I had a hard time figuring it out. But I think that's why, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's hard to figure something out when it doesn't make sense. And I do think that the prosecution, they tried to drive this point home pretty hard to the jury.
I think this is something that the prosecution likes to lay out because it's something that they can allow the jury to visualize. you can picture the breakfast laying by the bedside. And either when you leave, it's still there. And when you come home, it's either still there or someone ate it. There's no middle ground. It's either there or it's not there.
So I think as far as the prosecution is concerned, what they're saying, Gibbs, is that she either came back earlier than the 911 call when she says she just got home, right? So they're thinking she was home much earlier than when the call was made, or she never left when she says she did. Now, one thing that did hamper the prosecution, they wanted to bring up the case of Raynella's first husband, Ed, but they were not allowed to.
But they even had a second case that they weren't allowed to bring up that she was involved in that would also probably sealed it up for him pretty well. And it was about a guy named Steve Walker. And Steve Walker's ex-wife was Raynella's first husband's secretary.
So Ed's secretary.
Ed's secretary. Ed and her were more than work buddies, all right? They had an affair, and they had a child. She had a child, but Steve always thought it was his child until they got divorced in 1995. And during that trial, 1995, it came out that the child was Ed's.
Well, that must have been a shocker to Steve Walker.
Oh, he was pissed, and rightfully so, right? I mean, all this time you think this child is yours and you find out it's not. And I can't even imagine the emotional distress and stuff that someone goes through for something like that. And for the child, too. Steve and Raynella are really upset about this. Ed's gone, but Raynella, she's still mad at him because he had an affair. And she just found out this guy she fell madly in love with cheated on her. Now, Raynella files a police report on May 26th of 1995. And she tells in the police report that Steve Walker, he's acting all psychotic. He's out there pissing on Ed's gravesite, which is on their estate. The 165 acres. They must have their own little burial plot area. And she also tells police that she fired a warning shot into the ground to scare him off. But instead, Walker grabbed the gun from her and then he fled. Now, when the police talk to Steve, he tells a different story. He says Raynella picked him up from his work that day, from the auto shop. And they drove out to her farm, to discuss this affair and this child and how they were going to handle everything. And as they're driving down the long lane to head up to the barn where they were going to park and talk about this, Steve looks over and he sees a revolver in the car. He doesn't think a whole lot about it, but he sees it. She stops the car when they get close to the barn, and all of a sudden she takes that gun and she just jerks her hand up, points it at him, and says, "I'm going to kill you, you son of a bitch." And then and then I'll raise that son. And then she fires a shot, but she misses. And he darts away. He runs. He trips on something. He falls and he lands on his back. And by the time he starts to try to get up, she's already on top of him, over him with the gun. And she's got a perfect shot. Perfect shot. But for whatever reason, she's out of bullets. It doesn't fire.
Well, that would be the reason.
Yeah, that would be the reason.
When you're out of bullets,
that's how lucky he gets. I mean, he is so lucky. And he even says to the police, "I would be dead if it had a bullet in it. She had that good of a shot on me."
So here's my question, Gibbs. Why did she only have one bullet in the gun?
Yeah, I don't know.
Barney Five?
Maybe.
She only carried one bullet?
One bullet. That's all I need is one bullet. So he gets up, he runs off, and that's the story that he tells the police. And that's the story the police believe.
Lucky. I mean, unbelievably lucky for him.
Extremely lucky. So it was 1995. They charge her with attempted murder, but she pleads it. She pleads it down to a lesser charge of assault. Doesn't have to do any time. And after 6 years, it gets expunged. Now, the defense will say, well, yeah, she pleaded because that's what her attorney told her to do. Because they knew in this state, if you pleaded that, right or wrong, you're not going to do any time. And in 6 years, you can get it expunged and won't be on your record. So it's no big deal.
Hell, I would have pleaded too. She didn't serve any time.
Yeah. But the jury never gets to hear the story because the judge would not allow it to be entered into the court.
So I would think, Gibbs, that the prosecution would have, if they could, They would have used it to try to further their story, establish a pattern, tell the jury, this is not the first time, this keeps happening, something like that. But I think in that sense, you would have to say that Raynella was a little lucky.
Yeah, she gets a lot of luck on her side, man.
So like we said, it's been 14 years since David's murder, and the jurors get the case. And it's any time at this point that they're going to come back with their verdict. But before the jurors can give their verdict, the defense files a motion. And it's called Rule 29, and it's a motion to throw out the case for lack of evidence. So you would think that this was like some type of last-ditch effort.
Yeah, it should be a simple, they ask, they get denied, and then you move forward with the verdict.
But that's not what happens.
No,
because
not with her.
One thing we haven't talked about, the judge that's sitting on the bench for this case, this is going to be his very last case prior to retirement. And he makes a ruling that the state failed to meet their burden of proof, and he grants the defense's motion for judgment of acquittal. Basically, the judge finds her not guilty and dismisses the case. So the jury never even gets to decide on all the evidence that they've heard. And under Tennessee law, there's no appeal on this thing because it's the judge's decision, right? The jury never got to make their decision to be appealed. The judge made it.
So you can imagine David's family, they're pissed. Trial 1, mistrial. Trial 2, guilty. Serves prison time, gets out because of the
drugged up
judge on the second trial.
Yeah.
Trial 3, they didn't get a chance to go to the verdict, to have the jury give the verdict because the judge finds in favor of this Rule 29. So they're upset. So the prosecutor, he's pissed. And even the jurors are pissed.
Everybody's pissed.
They are pissed. Because, and it's not funny, but all the jurors, when interviewed, would say that they would have found her guilty.
Well, imagine on a murder trial, you're putting in some work.
Yeah.
It's a commitment. So to get all the way through this thing to basically the end, you're gearing up to deliberate, and all of a sudden you don't get to do this duty that you've taken on. I can understand why it'd be a big letdown for them, especially like you said, given the fact that they would have found her guilty.
Yeah.
So they saw something totally different than what the judge saw.
Now Raynella, she's ecstatic.
Well, hell yeah.
And so is her, her kids. Her daughter's there. Her daughter's crying, ecstatic that her mom is going to be released. But again, everybody's upset with this judge. And so the judge does an interview to discuss why he made the decisions that he made.
And the judge would say, quote, strictly based on the evidence that I heard on both sides, but particularly the state side, if I'd have been the district attorney general, I would not have brought this case to trial. There was no gunshot residue found on her clothes or around her. She had an alibi. The state could not prove the time of death. The evidence was clearly insufficient to show that she was the perpetrator of the crime. There was no evidence to show that she was even the last person ever to see David Leath alive. There's a difference between being not guilty and being innocent. If the state does not prove its case, they're found not guilty. It doesn't say that they're innocent. I actually find that quote, that statement fascinating.
Yeah, especially that last part right there.
Because to me, if reading between the lines, and it's dangerous to do that, but what I'm hearing him say is that the state didn't have it. They didn't have the case, but that doesn't mean that she didn't do it.
Right.
It means they didn't prove that she did.
They didn't have everything lined up that he thought they should have to make the case. The jury thought they did.
Well, that's what's interesting.
So
he didn't think it, but the jury did.
But he's citing law, and he's saying based on law, they didn't have what it take, and he didn't want the jury to make that decision because they didn't have the legal knowledge.
Yep.
to make that type of decision.
And I do, and I said that before. And I'm making an assumption, but it is an assumption that he may have seen or may have thought this is where this was headed, and he didn't want to see it happen. And it is one of the things about our system, right? You are asking a number, in this case, let's say 12 lay people, essentially, to weigh what is sometimes incredibly confusing technical evidence and make the right decision.
Yeah.
It's not a perfect system by any means. And I don't know. I just think that he was really worried that she was going to be found guilty, and he didn't want that to happen because in his mind, the state didn't prove it. So Raynella is now 68 years old, grandmother. She's found not guilty, but like the judge said, doesn't mean she's innocent. But she's found not guilty. She's moved back to the farm. And at this point in time, prosecutors are reviewing their options.
Yeah, because they can't go back to her on David's case, the way that the judge ended that. So there's no options there. But they could go back to Ed's case. You know, they can exhume the body. And they've talked about maybe exhuming the body. But it's so...
It was such a strange death.
Right, and it's been such a long time. We know how sometimes exhuming those bodies, it just doesn't get you the answers you want at this point.
Well, and I really don't know what the body is going to tell you. They already know about the levels of morphine.
Right.
If he really was trampled to death, what's it going to show?
Right.
It's not going to prove that she set it up or she put it into motion. I do think that they would have if they couldn't prove David's case,
they'd have a hell of a time.
I agree with you. I think they'd have a very hard time building enough solid evidence to convict her of Ed's murder.
And I'm
not even sure if it was a murder.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't see him taking a 68-year-old grandmother back to court, which would be 2-3 years from now, by the time it got there, to maybe have a chance. I don't know. I just don't see it happening. I think Raynella's going to live with her children and grandchildren and have a happy rest of her life.
Yeah, for me, Gibbs, this is a really tough one. I just don't even know what to make of Ed's death. That one, I'm not even sure.
I'm not either. I don't know if you could really say that
he was killed.
Yeah, he could have made that decision himself to go out there.
Well, he could have taken too much morphine. He could have been in a lot of pain, and then all of a sudden thought, you know what? I need to get up and go check on the cattle.
Or himself said, you know, I'm just going to go out there and take my life on his own, and went out there and allowed himself to be.
Oh my God! I think that'd be that'd be a strange decision on how to take your own life.
No, but if he knew that it would get his family more money, and he thought, you know,
okay,
I'll take some morphine and I won't feel it, but I'll go out there and let it happen.
How do you know that the stampede is going to happen? Well, that you're not just going to be horribly maimed.
Well, maybe he knew how to maybe he knew what to do. Maybe, I don't know, smack the ass of a cattle and it got them all riled up. I don't know.
Of a cattle? Like a cattle is one thing?
Yeah, of a cow, of a steer. Maybe he went out there and did something to one of the steers.
Have you done a lot of cattle smacking ass in your time?
I do have a pair of assless chaps, you know.
The David Leath one is, I do think there's a lot there.
There's a
lot of smoke
there. Yep.
You know, the question is there fire?
Right.
And there were really, if I'm putting it, I think there's 3 juries that thought there were.
Yeah.
Because really, if you think about it, there's one holdout in that first one.
Right.
And then the other one did convict, and the third one would have.
So if you look at that, it's pretty compelling.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And they got to see a lot more than what we probably, uncovered.
But that's how the legal system works. It is what it is.
But then you have that judge that said, you know what?
That's right.
I didn't see it. But anyway, that is that's the case of the husbands of Raynella Leath. All right, Gibbs, we got some voicemails, so let's play those.
Hey, Mike and Gibby, it's Crystal from Canada. I just wanted to say thank you so much for your podcast. It totally helps pass the time recovering from my injury, and I love the true crime all the time. And keep up the good work, guys.
All right, Crystal from Canada. Sorry to hear about your injury.
Yeah, I hope you feel better. Hope you recover soon and in full.
But Gibbs, I love it. Anytime somebody says what we do helps them in any way,
Right.
whether it's passing the time, washing the car, doing chores, helps them feel better. I just, it's cool.
Yeah, I'm glad I can help you get better.
Gibby's doing it all by himself.
Mike, Gibby, this is Max in Atlanta calling again. Just want to say I just listened to the Tom and Ashley Unsolved. That was very good. It was hard to tell who did what. You know, one minute you're thinking Tom is telling the truth that Ashley killed herself, or then you think maybe Tom killed Ashley. I look at Tom right off the bat. You can see the guy seems like a dick. And then that kid heard him saying that he can't believe that he killed her. So it's you could go either way on that one. I'm curious to see what the listeners have to say. Right now, I couldn't make a call either way. As always, guys, I really appreciate your show. Helps me get through working out. Makes the workouts go very fast. Appreciate it a lot, guys. Take care. Bye.
So appreciate the voicemail from Max. And Max called a number of times, very active on social media.
He keeps it real.
Yeah, he does. He keeps it real.
Yeah.
He said, that guy's a dick.
He did, man.
He
kept it real. And Max, you're going to like this one then.
Yeah, if you're talking about going back and forth, because like we said, I go back and forth on this case
he'll
too.
like it. I think Max will also like the solved one this week because, again, it's happened in his hometown.
No, that's true. Another Atlanta-ish case. All right, so that is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe, keep your own time ticking, and have a great Thanksgiving.
Gobble, gobble.
And we'll be back with a brand new episode in 2 weeks.
Maybe.
We will.
Possible.
Definitely.
Not sure.
Refreshed.
Renewed.
Energized.
Yeah, a little heavier.
That's for sure.